story to tell. Surprise, surprise. This story comes from my years in seminary. I was in a preaching class, and each one of us had to preach at least one sermon, I think it was 2 sermons, over the course of the class. And we were critiqued by the class members. Let me tell you, that's kind of a scary thing to happen. There was another female student who based her sermon around spending the day walking in heels. There was a male student who complained that he didn't get it. He didn't know what she was talking about. And the male professor thankfully said, exactly. Think of all the sermons preached over all the years with sports and fishing and race car illustrations that women didn't get or they had to translate. Maybe it's okay for men to have to translate once in a while as well. I found this poem this week I want to share with you. It's titled Sacrament. After Jesus climbed up out of death, the first thing he did was the laundry. He creased the shroud that covered his face, just so, and placed it back where it belonged. He could have left it in a messy pile in a hurry to file his taxes on time or to make that lunch date or outrun death again with a long list of errands. But he took the time in the tomb to fold the laundry like he had eternity on his side. Maybe it was just that he dearly loved the marvel of fabric, the hands, earth, and magic that made it. The first thing he touched when the wind blew back into his beaten-up lungs. One thing is for sure, no one ever thinks of the laundry as resurrection, but both never end. The author of this poem is David R. Henson. Yes, it was written by a man, a stay-at-home man who recognizes the fact that the laundry never ends. Neither does the dusting or the cooking or the cleaning. Now, some of us do it differently than others do. No one does it quite the same. My mother-in-law, my former mother-in-law when I was married, came from Baltimore to visit us one time. She was sitting at the counter while I was preparing dinner, and she watched everything that I did, and that made me nervous. I was a young bride. I was nervous having my mother-in-law sitting there watching me. And then she said, "Isn't it interesting how we all do things differently in our kitchens, and each way is the right way?" She then proceeded to tell me how I was doing it wrong. You never know. Mr. Henson, the poet, is a stay-at-home dad whose life revolves around laundry and cooking and laundry, these two never-ending activities. Henson seems surprised to read that Jesus cooks and does the laundry. For him, this is by far the most striking feature of the resurrection stories in John's Gospel. The first thing Jesus does after he's resurrected is to fold the laundry. And the last thing he does on earth is to cook a meal for his friends. If we stop and give some serious thought to these two experiences, there's something astounding about Jesus doing these things. There's a quietness to this realization that refuses to be explained in a neat and tidy way. Jesus led this remarkable life of revolution. His death was political. His message was a threat to the powerful of his time. There was no separation of church and state, synagogue and empire back then. What Jesus did was political. He was threatening the rulers of the day. He went on what appears to be a tireless 3-year mission with a dizzying pace of travel, preaching, and making miracles happen throughout the region. In his final week, he went marching on Jerusalem during the protests of Palm Sunday. Remember, his entry was a protest. kings entered the city on a fine white steed, Jesus came in riding a colt, which was very unkingly. Yet people rallied around him. Later, he was unjustly arrested and executed. This all had a frenetic, almost desperate pace to it. It feels urgent, immediate, and breathless. In the Gospel according to Mark, time and again, we read of something Jesus said or did, and then we read immediately he, whatever, immediately. If you read the book of Mark, you find that word immediately happening over and over again, always moving, always on the go. And then Jesus dies, and he lies quiet in the tomb, and is at last resurrected to great confusion and doubt among his followers. In our own confusion and doubt, amidst the celebration and rejoicing of Easter, we might be overlooking something about the resurrection. It might be a little prosaic, boring even. I know this might sound run-of-the-mill, ordinary, mundane, but it's actually something of a marvel to me. After the wild pace of Holy Week, filled with so many shocking and heartbreaking events, the resurrection, by comparison, seems downright sedate. There's almost a languid quality about it. It's like Jesus is stretching out with a deep, holy breath, yawning himself from the tomb. Jesus is no longer doing miracles for the masses. He's no longer directly confronting the powers that be. He's no longer teaching in synagogues or leading a movement or marching on Jerusalem. He's just doing a few simple things, slowly. Gardening, maybe? He was thought to be a gardener, remember? He was walking, eating, doing laundry, cooking. As I said, that first thing that he did was to fold up the shroud neatly and to take care with his linen grave clothes. That detail delightfully interrupts the reading of John's Easter story every year. Amid the confusion and the fear, and maybe a touch of elated hope, there is laundry neatly folded in the tomb. I mean, who does that? Who does that? Folds their laundry neatly in the tomb. The first thing Jesus does when he comes back is the laundry, folding clothes. It's enough to make a woman's or a stay-at-home dad's whole heart warm with his presence, like a load of whites straight from the dryer. Have you ever wrapped yourself in a warm towel after a shower? Or put on pajamas in the winter night right out of the dryer? It's enough to make me believe in the glorious weirdness of the resurrection. And then in the final verses of the final chapter, in our final gospel, we realize that Jesus, for all of his talk of feeding, for all of his multiplication of bread and fish, for all the times he feasted with sinners, tax collectors, and Pharisees, Jesus apparently never cooked a meal of his own, at least not one worth remembering, until he's resurrected. Meals feature so heavily throughout the Gospels. Jesus presided over many feasts and meals, but he apparently didn't take the time to cook them himself. Some think he certainly took the time to criticize those like Martha, who spent much time cooking, and I'm going to say I'm not sure I agree with this because I did a sermon once on Mary and Martha, the sisters of Bethany, and I'm not sure Martha was in the kitchen because it doesn't say anything about that in the Bible. Scriptures don't say she's in the kitchen, they don't say she's cooking, but people still think Jesus is criticizing her for her cooking, being busy. But we never read about Jesus actually cooking a meal in the Gospels. But here, the last thing Jesus does on earth is cook a meal, his first recorded one. And then he commands Peter to feed his sheep. In the verses following what I read to us, we find John 21, verses 15 through 17. When they finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my lambs." A second time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Tend my sheep." He said to him a third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter felt hurt because he'd said to him the third time, "Do you love me?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep." In the resurrection, it seems, Jesus institutes the sacrament of housework and everyday chores. It's almost as if Jesus is asking us to pay attention to the slow and the ordinary as the place where we are most likely to find resurrection, not in the busyness of trying to change and transform the world, or churches, or even our own lives. I read a Facebook post this week from another clergywoman on Monday, Easter Monday. She wrote, "Coming out of Holy Week, I'm just utterly numb and broken. I'm guessing I'm not the only one. So sisters, I'm praying for those of us who still feel like Mary did walking to the tomb that morning. May the God of all peace hold you and comfort you in this difficult time. May you experience the resurrected Christ soon, and may he fill you with hope. And in case you have not heard it, well done, good and faithful servant. You are loved." My response to her, among many other clergywomen, was, "Retired clergy here, I remember realizing years ago that a sense of resurrection did not happen for me on Easter Day. I just needed to get through Holy Week and Easter. Feeling the newness of resurrection came days, maybe weeks, sometimes even months after Easter Sunday." Maybe Easter Sunday didn't feel like there was a resurrection in your life. Not this year. Hang on. It might come later, and not during this particular season. We are in Eastertide now through Pentecost. The resurrection is something I think is different from experiencing Easter Sunday. You know, we're joyful on Easter Sunday, most of us, many of us. There's stuff going on in our lives, though, that maybe we don't feel like our lives are resurrected, or what is this whole resurrection thing about? Maybe Easter Sunday didn't feel like there was a resurrection in your life. But hang on. Hang on. On the other hand, maybe Jesus is trying to tell us that if we want to change the world or even ourselves, we should cook a meal or do the laundry. Because if that can't lead us to Jesus, to love, to transformation, well then nothing probably will.